Joachim, did you want
Oh,
to say something?
we're now recording. That's awesome.
Okay. Okay, good. Yes, so immediate needs. So the project that I'm joining for the call, we're sort of at a stage where we have had funded support for 3 years. Well, actually 6 years. There was a previous project that sort of laid some of the foundations for this, and then another 3 years trying to set up, experiment with governance, experiment with different tools, experiment with what works for people in our community at an international level, and what are the kind of working models that work for people that have a permaculture background and run permaculture projects. Well, what's the digital literacy like? So exploring this for a while now, to try to find the sweet spot really of the thing that's gonna really run. So we are now finishing that funded period off, and now it's at a stage where it could conceivably self-sustain on volunteer effort. However, we were fortunate enough to get another round of funding, and that funding now has a completely different framing. It tries to build the capacity further of the network. So it's going to incubate certain sub-networks. It's going to contribute to certain digital developments. Has framed a domain where it tries to grow the capacity of the network that now exists. So that is where that is at. What we are in the process of is trialing different spaces outside of the 2.5 years ago. Some people set up some online spaces for this kind of work. So we're using Slack, we're using Google Apps, we're using Zoom, we're using all the standard kind of tools that in these sort of movements people can get their hands on for free. So that's effectively, I think, how these decisions were made. I wasn't around at that time, but now that some of the governance is working and that some of the social systems are there, I think some of us think it's time to relook at the tools and say, okay, well, what have we learned? What's working? What's not working? And in line with new experiments around how we work cooperatively, so different types of working models for collaborative working that we want to try. So with these proposals coming through now for the different groups that are part of our network, working in different ways and experimenting with different ways of engaging with each other at different time frames, more asynchronous versus synchronous communications, more like what is it we do in chat, what is it we do in documents, what is it we do in sociocracy decision-making processes, how do we facilitate meetings other ways. So there's all this experimentation going on, and digital technology is really woven into that as it constrains and enables in many different ways the different kind of processes that we want to see. So that being said, there is no specific focus right now. So one thing that we have just recently approved is we are going to be moving to Nextcloud and Collabora with our service. So that's a trial we're going to run for the next year. We're going to have Nextcloud and Collabora hosted for us, and we're going to trial how successful we can get people out of Google Drive effectively. That's the idea. How can we get people out of Google Drive? So that's one thing, a trial that we have allocated a budget to. So that's going to be going on for a year now. And then we host a WordPress multi-site where we are going to develop a service for people to develop websites for permaculture projects that come out of the collab itself. So these projects that we want to see at an international level, they all need some sort of web presence because otherwise they don't exist. So that is a service that we are exploring to offer to permaculture audiences. So that is some of the things that are already set up. But other than that, anything and everything really. We are looking at. I've had some conversations with people from Holochain last week at a conference where I was at. So I'll be looking at opportunities to have further conversations with them. And then there is one of us has quite a link with DAO Stack. So that's something else we're looking at as well. So we're just exploring, what's out there and what people are working on in the communities that you're part of.
Great, it's really helpful. I propose that I'll start it off and then pass it to Joachim, who will do the deep dive into the collaboration, cooperation as a service, and then kick it back to me that I'll look at the possibilities with the network of networks and looking at maps, because you're never going to get everybody on the same tool. So it's helpful if you can look at how to find the others, basically working on other tools.
Mapping has been a thread that has been going on for the last 3 years. And first there was a Google map, but then there wasn't enough energy in maintaining that up to date. And yeah, so mapping is one of the things that is of interest to us, yes.
And Les, is there anything else that if we can just kind of go over that in the next 15 minutes, then give a kind of brief overview, and we can leave 15 minutes for just open discussion?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Joachim, does that?
Sounds good.
Great. So just briefly to set up, and Joachim, I'll pass it to you as soon as we're ready for the deck. So open the deck. But what's emerged in the collective has been what we're calling CAAS, or Collaboration, Cooperation as a Service. I have an echo, Joachim. I think maybe mute your, or maybe Stacy. I guess the important thing to realize is that we're not building a platform to which we hope everybody will flock. The portal, which we're looking to make available to other organizations, which can be part of the demo, allows you to take, if you have Nextcloud or the Collabora suite or a WordPress thing, it allows you to take all your different tools and put them under one place with some pretty amazing functionalities that are emerging. And it's basically been an experiment. We have all the problems of the collective. We're all volunteer, we're all distributed. We have, all sorts of the normal, how do we cooperate at scale with a distributed team problem. And as we've been solving those for ourselves, some tools and processes have emerged that are becoming the collaboration as a service suite. As you look through the deck, there's a huge amount of information in it, but just realize that you could implement only a tiny part of it, and sort of what works for you, and then continue to see, look into other collectives, other organizations that are using, like the Open Learning Commons or DigLife itself or other partners using these things, and kind of explore how they're being used. So with that, I'll hand it to Joachim's amazing screen share, and then just try and zip through there as best we can. And okay. I'll pull up a map to show you as well.
All right. So before I share, one more word. So we've all been there, done that. You mentioned, Philip, you mentioned Slack, right? We looked at that option. Why is it good? Why is it bad? Does it work? Web content publishing. There's so many options out there. What can you do with? How do you do that? And what's the best way to do that? So these questions come back over and over and over again, right? What we want to do with cooperation as a service is really to say, okay, here's a set of 5, 6, 7 basic services that seem to work for an organization your size. It seems to scale well too, and we can build around that. And then you don't have to worry about licensing. You don't have to worry about where does it go in the future, and how do I maintain and update and upgrade that kind of technology. So that's the idea. So you can focus really on your topic, right, on your people and what you want to build out of this. So it's really an acceleration of a way of working together in these online spaces, and it's a lot of input from existing participants, right? So it's not only you know, as Christina mentioned, a platform, a software as a service model. It's constant input, you know, constant, you know, conversations about what's the best way to move these kind of technologies forward. You know, what's the best way to use that in my context, right? And apply that for my problems that I have in my space. So with that, let me share a few slides here. I'm not going to go through all of them here because, as Christina mentioned, there's a lot of stuff here that you can explore further, or you know, have other conversations with us. Ping me if you need me, if you have any questions. So let me jump to this slide here. Again, the focus on cooperation, right? Obviously, we're of the same mindset here, especially a permaculture space. It's not about competition. You know, it's not about win or lose. It's not about top-down communication. You know, even heads-down collaboration, where you only do collaboration and assign tasks to people and do stuff. But to us, it's more like a what I call experience space that opens up so the possibilities of doing an infinite game kind of thing, right? So an ongoing space where you have what I call a playing field for new and adjacent possibilities. So that word adjacent possibilities will come up a few times in this deck here and in our conversations. And then looking quickly at, you know, where we're coming from. So the DigLife Collective has been nurturing technology we trust for quite a while now. And by that we mean what kind of technology is out there. You know, the typical topics around decentralization, privacy and security, equality, digital identity. You know, these kind of topics. We've been nurturing these topics in the collective. But we've been so far only applying this internally to our members and see what kind of tool sets and protocols we can deliver to our members to become more efficient and effective in actually looking at these topics and communicating these topics outside the collective. So with this new thing, what we're building here, the cooperation as a service, it's just the counterpart. It's called the yin and yang, the duality here that we see as, well, we recognize a lot of projects out there, you know, inside organizations, inside groups that need help with getting off the ground and start to actually take advantage of the things that other people have learned, other groups have learned, right? So with this DigLife Collective, we want to sort of bring these two sides together, right? So recognizing there are challenges out there, and everybody has its own context and their projects, and that's connecting these two in a space that is open enough, that is rich enough for people to begin these in-depth conversations and begin to cooperate on building these solutions for whatever challenge you're facing, right? So that's the goal we're setting with DigLife and the collaboration as a service model. There's more detail here, but I just want to say that, again, this is kind of the bridge between what I call here an ontological architecture. So the challenges that are out there in different spaces that may or may not overlap, right? And the different organizations and groups that tackle these challenges, right? And the idea is to provide a space that allows for adjacent possibilities. So meaning, you know, if one group works on one kind of challenge that's similar to, you know, what you do in permaculture, let's say, maybe there's some overlap, maybe there's some similar questions that have been answered before. Why not reaching out to these folks and cooperate in that same space, right? So it's not only your entity, right, that you're creating here and you're nurturing your folks, but it also recognizing, oh, there are other entities also in that space that may work on similar things, or you may borrow some ideas, or you may even, you know, cooperate and work on a new project with this group that's also part of this. So it's entirely up to you what you want to do with this. And yeah, I mentioned experience space. What I wanted to say here again is this is a slide that borrows heavily on Nora Bates's, you know, concept of symmetry and contextual mutual learning. So it's almost like you know, we see it as a coral reef ecosystem that we're creating here, right? So you can benefit from all of these transactions and interactions that are happening inside this experience space. So we want to bring people deeper into that kind of model and thinking, but give them enough, you know, space on their own, right? So this is not a prescriptive thing, and we don't want to say, you know, you're part of this or you're reporting to anyone here. This is entirely, an evolving ecosystem of spaces, of places, of ideas that are coming out of the interactions with these members. And give you a quick overview of quote unquote the platform, right? So Christina mentioned this is not software as a service. This is not a platform where we're selling some service and then everything is bundled into that platform. This is a collection of services, of existing open source software that's out there that we're trying to aggregate here and sort of group that under certain typical patterns that you see in organizations, right? So we call them these 6 service patterns or 6 service areas, and they're grouped around here the conversational patterns. So the typical thing where you hold these generative and engaging conversations. What tools are used in here? Organizational patterns. How do you build some structure and see some of these adaptive structures coming out of these conversations? Then socio-psychological patterns here to look at how you actually build safe and trusted spaces and relationships in these spaces. It's a very important component for us, because it obviously it's not only about technology here, or really this technology is just the enabler in the background. It's a lot more about, once you have that technology, what do you do with this? How do you enable it, and how do you work together in better ways to engage the community, engage your folks to create something, to output something, not only individually, but also more collaboratively in a group, right? And then at the bottom here, you see a few other boxes here around called socioeconomic patterns. So a lot of the accounting and contribution tracking is happening here. And possibly also some of the ledger systems where you can record some of these transactions for future use. So we're diving into that too. Some of we call rhizomatic patterns here, where you look at the local context, really. So all of these things happening, on a broader scale, in these virtual spaces where you don't look at geography, but then also at the same time, obviously, you want to apply this stuff in a local context. So this is an area we're exploring on how do you build these roots into the system, right? And link that to the global conversation to a local context where you are and what's needed. And then lastly, some social cultural patterns here in how do you promote what you do in a community, in a wider network or social network area. So these 6 patterns, if you look deeper into that, and we don't go down into each one of these, but here's some things we're now becoming more clear about what that means here. Under conversational patterns, for example, there's one label called augmented chats. So this is where you see the typical chat solutions. You mentioned Slack, that's a chat solution, but we want to go deeper in that and say, okay, what else can we do with these chat solutions? How can we augment these conversations with additional say webhooks, feeds we can bring into these conversations, or bots we can listen into certain conversations, or take out some of the routine tasks. So that to me is a lot more than just putting out a chat solution, right? So what else can you do with that chat? So likewise, there are other conversational patterns we're looking at, calls, like video conferencing calls. What are good tools for that? Zoom is one, obviously, that we're using here. But there are others that are more embedded, integrated into our solutions, into our Mattermost conversation chat. Notes and wikis is a big topic. So note-taking, social notes and note-taking inside a collective, and wikis. David is fantastic with federated wikis, looking at what else can you do in these wiki spaces to add more structure to your conversation. I'm looking a lot at cards and boards, so visualizing some of the card metaphors that are out there to rearrange your thinking, rearrange your what I call social objects, objects that are more geared toward longer term thinking rather than the quick, fast flowing chats that you can capture in cards and display them on sort of boards, be that Kanban board type of things, or other ways of showing and showcasing your content. So I'll stop here to have more space for questions here. but you can see there's, you know, so more details on the organizational patterns and the other things we're working on into each of these boxes here. And it's I just want to emphasize here, we're not done yet, right? So this is work in progress. This is we continue to refine this really every day with new things, new stories, new technologies that are constantly coming up on the horizon to share that and really give members an opportunity to benefit from all of this. And apply that in, could be, you know, in terms of templates that we're building here that you can weave into your conversations, or I don't know if we have time for a quick preview of the holonic mapping we're doing with the organizations to give you the full picture of where you are in the bigger picture, right? And can zoom in and out of this, or the membership profiles that we're building. To see what kind of skill sets exist in the collective, and how you might want to see others, you know, or reach out to others to get them on board and excited about your tasks and your activities. Okay, I'll break here with the last slide here. So again, the thinking is kind of a coral reef metaphor that seems to resonate well here. So keep it alive, right, and thriving, and build the different pieces. You know, as soon as we have more knowledge about them, and we know some stuff works, others don't work. And again, share that with everybody else who's a member in your organization or across different organizations that are willing to join us. Okay, let me stop here for a second for any questions you have or clarifications you need.
I assume that's directed at me. No, I think that all makes sense to me. Yeah, I can see what you're trying to do there. Yeah, I don't think I have any questions.
Let me do a quick screen share so you can see the live portal. This is, Joachim, are we close to being able to have a portal for another organization, or what's the timeline on that, do you know?
Yeah, I think we're very close. So yeah, let me share that real quick here with you, give you an idea of the portal. So right now we have here's DigLife, right? So a portal is simple, you know, a pointer to a website called at diglife.coop, where we encourage members to find out about the different services we offer, sort of an entry point into the service. But you can also obviously do it directly to that service. You know, for example, if I go to here on the right side, you see the 6 different basic services that we currently offer. If I click on Holonic Map, for example, that shows you the current map for the DigLife Collective, and I can see on top here you see the different domains or organizations that are already participating. And if I click on all, that gives me a view of all of the different groups here. And I can go dive into, say, here's operations. So this is around DigLife operations. And then here's a big one called sysadmin. And I'm a member of sysadmin. Now I can go deeper into that, and then I'll end up in the channel. You know, here's the channel for sysadmin. That is now the chat and the conversation around anything sysadmin related. And I can go now from here into the different other spaces, right? So if I go to stewards here, different channel in the same domain operations, and DigLife here, for operations, and I can jump to the DigLife domain here inside Mattermost, and then continue the conversation here. So the idea is really to sort of zoom in and zoom out, right? So you get the bigger picture, you see where the people are, and some of these bubbles here, they also have meaning. So the size of the bubble tells you how many active conversations are happening there. If they're fading out into the background, means they haven't been actively involved, so less conversations over a given period of time. So it tells you more about how this thing organically grows, right? So it's not, so this is not an org chart, right, where we put boxes and jobs and functions into these different, top-down driven organizational structures. This is much more organic, where we see stuff coming out of a group, right, and then they evolve, and then bubbles pop up and they grow and they can shrink, right? So if there's no activity, then maybe that's a signal to say maybe that group should be, merged into another group or split into other bubbles. That's really, really coming out of the activities from the members, rather than prescribing everything top down and say we have this traditional, marketing, technology, operations structure. It can be different, and that's what we're trying to experiment here, and that's what we're trying to give also new members the opportunity to experiment with this kind of technology and visualization of the different organizational design structures you might want to adapt to, right? And then one more thing I wanted to show you here, that's the network map. The note taking is an important piece for us. So note taking is really a way to capture more of the long-term thinking, capture things like protocols here, right? So here's a Zoom protocol, here's a pricing protocol, partner onboarding protocol. Capture that in, if I open this here, in snippets. We're using a tool called CauDMD that allows you to author document. It's very much like a Google Doc, but this is not Google here. And you mentioned also that you want to break out of the Google frame, right? And use Nextcloud, which is great, so anything that moves us away from the big centralized providers, Facebook, Google, etc., towards more technology you own, that's important, right? So I mean, especially for us, when we say we own it, that means we actually have this running on a machine that's hosted on DigitalOcean, but it's software that we control. So anything that we put on that machine is software we installed and we maintain. And if we want to take it off, we can. If we want to add more resources to that, we can. So there's no third party involved here that says, okay, like Slack, for example, right? They're sitting somewhere and they're turning on and off the services for you. We turn them on because we have that running on our own cloud on instance. So that's another benefit of using an infrastructure like what we're building here. So you have these nodes, right? And you can edit these nodes concurrently and collaboratively in a team by yourself. And start to organize the content. That's very important. So short snippets here with a few simple tags. Don't make it too complicated. Saying who authored them gives you enough information to begin to sort of organize your content in different ways. In that case, I can go to DigLife. So these are notes only written for DigLife, and you can share these notes. And the idea is to see. Here's Les, right? We're working on a Zoom protocol here. The idea is to sort of preserve the active participants, right? So going forward, if some of this turns out to create some future value for other organizations, you can actually take that kind of tangible card and reuse it, right? Reapply it, or reward, the people who were involved in creating, say, the Zoom protocol here, like Les and myself.
So Joachim, we have 15 minutes left. I'm wondering if we could kind of wrap this up and give me a sec for showing the maps, and then still leave some time for questions. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's good.
So Philip, just quickly, I'll show you a system map and a network map. The point of these is to align. I almost see the system map as a z-axis in network mapping, because a lot of the time when you do just social network maps, you're looking at a big hairball of who knows who, who's related to who in some way, but it doesn't give you any sort of way to navigate it other than kind of diving into who you know and kind of joining the hairball. So if you seed those the profile questions or the survey questions with which you fill out the network map with a few key activities and outcomes that the network cares about, then you're able to click into the activity, like, you know, composting would be, you know, who is actively composting in a publicly available way within 10 miles of my house would be a, you know, a specific activity. So I'll just show you this. The map that I'm going to show you is from an effort to redefine palliative care in the US. So they're looking at transforming the conversation around palliative care, moving away from the broken US health model of fee-for-service to more whole person care. So I'll show you the system map and then the network map, but think of it in terms of what are the categories and activities and outcomes that the permaculture network would want. And I will stop my video for bandwidth and share my screen. So we did an initial map that is a very, very basic system map, just to show that they're aligning around this ultimate goal of patient experience of living well with serious illness. They unfolded it as a presentation. So I'll let that open up. And you can see that there are various the various aspects of the system of like quality of care, prepared family, and then access to care and cost all come into that. You can unfold a map like this as a presentation. So you can add text slides and images as well as the actual map slides, but it allows you to sort of walk through the spaghetti and meatball diagram instead of just overwhelming people with it. This was from a larger system dynamics map that was like a download of my client's brain at the time. This was like his snapshot of how he thought the system worked. And it's less important to understand this and more important to know that from doing this, we got the categories that he needed to inform this network map. Let me get to the right view here. So here you can see the various organizations involved and their functions. So you can see that this is a medical care provider. If you go up and add, let's say, the community served, you can see that there's some that serve administrators, policymakers, payers, community care providers. So if you're like a policymaker, for example, you can click on one out and you have 3 programs in this network where you might want to really pay attention or collaborate in some way. And then each of these, as the network kind of gets to know itself and is able to see itself better, any of these particular views can be linked in the main sidebar. So when you describe the map, you can say, like, who is doing that. Let me discard those. So what is the scope of this ecosystem? So that they've identified a view that answers that question. Who's working on the things that I care about? They've identified a view that answers that question, and you can explore. And each one of these has the capacity to be a tool for that organization or project to showcase their work. You can embed a video to sort of better show what they're doing and what their place in the network is. So that's just a brief intro to system and network mapping. When they're linked, I call them an ecosystem map. And I think there's a huge potential for saying, you know, the UK Permaculture Collab is this one thing on a much wider network of the international permaculture movements, and beginning to showcase who's doing what is a great way to find alignment and collaborate. So.
Christina, can I just check in? How does the mapping sit with DigLife? Is it an element of DigLife, or is it a separate?
Yeah, it's one of the holons, basically. In that, it's one of the little tiles is maps and holons. The how you do a map is a question, but everything that I do is available through like DigLife itself. So
Thank you. So thank you very much, Christina and Joachim. I've noticed, Philip, you put some questions in the chat box. If do you feel those are being answered, Philip?
I had a look around the website earlier. So some of them are partially answered there in terms of, the documents with which you incorporated the cooperative are there. So some of that is there, but really trying to see where things are at, practically speaking, who shows up to making decisions, how many people are those, which kind of organizations do they represent, what are their interests in DigLife, then what's moving forward as, you say it's nearly ready to be provided as a collaboration, as a service to other people. What's the business model of that going to be? Are they all going to be members and pay a membership fee to maintain this, or are they going to be charged for a service or for just part of the services? Is there going to be a subscription model? So all of these other things, I think I understand sort of, I think what Joachim showed in terms of the hologram and the zooming in and then going into the different spaces and that kind of, user experience. I think I understand that. I know the tools that you seem to be incorporating, the ones that I saw so far. And so I'm confident that those in principle would align with our values. The hosting is a bit, I would personally say, okay, so can we find possibly other solutions for the hosting? But in general, that all looks good. And I think in terms of the way that the collab currently governs itself, the collab currently works, the kind of stuff that you're offering as a service would be relevant to the work that we are doing. I would, upon initial, impression, would fit. So that's why some of these other questions go into some of the other areas of how financially sustainability. I mean, how is this going to be maintained? The people that actually work on this, the developers, is any of their time paid, or have they made such long-term commitments that one can rely on them keeping it up and running? And those are the kind of questions that then become relevant.
Okay, we've got like 4 or 5 minutes left, and the business model itself is of interest, because I believe the DigLife is looking for some beginnings of a financial meaningful return on their investment. How is that offer likely to be framed, Joachim or Christina? I mean, in a minute, because obviously this is an introductory call with potentially the Permaculture Collab.
Right, yeah, so I can jump in, and Christina, if you want to add to that. So the business model is really simple. What we want to do is we want to support our infrastructure costs and certain roles around keeping the infrastructure alive. Obviously system administration is one of them. Making sure the entities that join us have good support for any questions that come up. So the model is basically saying, it's $1 per user per year per organization. Okay, so that's the basic model. $1 per user per organization. That will cover, obviously, very, very basic infrastructure and role support. Now, when we're saying per organization is, we leave that up to the entity that joins us if they want to charge more than that. So if you say you provide, we have a space for you, and you say you want to charge $2 per member per user, you can do that, and that fund would go directly to you, back to you. So we're only looking at creating the right amount of members to sustain our operation over time, right? So if we have 1,000 members, well, that helps obviously to support our infrastructure and to create some additional roles in the future, right, as we evolve, right? And that's why we onboard sort of by organization, right? So the assumption is that we have medium scale organizations that bring members into the same, adjacent possible space that will then support and enable additional roles for us in the future. But the benefit really should go straight back to you as an organization, right? And you can even decide, say, if you want to onboard your members and you want to give them 100 free licenses, right? So the first 100 members, the cost either you carry, or we can get into a sponsorship model where we say we sponsor the first 50 licenses for you members, right? And then from then on, it's you take this, or the members, right? Or the new members that are joining will pay for that.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. And Christina, I see you put a note up in the chat for a draft.
Yeah, and Philip, just to clarify, the mapping that I do on Kumu is a separate of the pricing that's there. Oh, did I cut out?
Slightly.
Completely. You're back. You're gone.
Okay. So
2 minutes. 1 minute, Christina. Let's come back to Christina. I think Philip, I think that gives you some indication. Could we just have some feedback? Stacey, do you think you could yourself kind of repeat that kind of patter to new clients and introduce new organizations? You're muted, Stace.
I had actually asked Eric to send me the tape, because I think after I watch it a few times, yes. But I'd like to be able to watch it and get comfortable and practice.
Thank you. And I'm just going to go around, because Eric and David, you've seen this before a couple of times. I mean, have you got any feedback for Joachim and Christina, or any comments on this way of presenting? I mean, personally, it is just, the detail is just overwhelming. It is an overwhelming experience, and I'm not sure myself whether we need to sort of draw out the meta concepts, get some feedback, and then respond to feedback to get into detail, rather than presenting detail as part of the initial presentation. Eric and David, I'd be interested to have any feedback from yourselves. Eric.
Yeah, well, when I first joined DigLife, there was a learning curve, but I just started using it, and then I found the Mattermost chat was very easy to use. It really organized the conversations where they belong. And then I gradually tried some of the other tools. The CodeMD was great. I was able to create some documents collaboratively. And I think people need a way of being introduced to the platform, even like an online training class, or just a directed training, just to get familiar. And then they'll see the advantages, and then you get feedback from that training.
Yeah, and that cost has to be recovered somehow. David, have you got any feedback for us?
I think it'll be a little easier after there's more content up in the open, and then it'll be easier to step through and show people features. And so I'm doing some of that with Robert on open learning, but when it comes to DigLife, there might be a strategy to have a guest account or a trial account of some sort that people can actually try it out themselves, because there's a lot there, but when you're hands-on to it, it's like, oh, that's what they're talking about. So
yeah,
think about that.
I have to jump to another call. Philip, it's $10 a year to join DigLife as a member, and from everything you've said, regardless of Permaculture Collab's decision, we would love you to be an individual member, and then you can try out the tools and all of that. So the link is there in the chat. And Stacy and Les and Eric, just so you know, we have a draft lesson plan for DigLife of like weak modules that's in one of the channels in the Open Learning Commons. That's of course stalled out because I'm trying to do too much all at once, but I definitely have that on the roadmap to put as well into the Climb Dat Mountain thing, so people can find it on Beaker as well as on CodeMD, and probably also as well as on a map. And Philip, it might, if you're interested in diving into the system and network mapping side of things, I have a couple of decks that explain the process that I use to do that. We can go over sort of what initial costs would be and that sort of thing for a network of networks. I think, yeah, soil regeneration is something that's incredibly important right now, obviously. So yeah, I would be psyched to do that. And if you're already working with Aldo, he's a, Kumu as well, and an amazing collaborator. That would be pretty incredible. So
cool.
Excellent. Thank you, Christina. We're over time, but I'm just going to invite Michael Linton to say a few words, because I know, Philip, on the Permaculture Collab, there is an interest in mutual aid, and Michael is a bit of a global expert on mutual credit. So, Michael, if you're there, if you maybe have a few words of your experience of DigLife so far? No? Okay. Joachim, can I just hand over to you for closing comments and close the call?
Sure. Thank you, Les. Fantastic facilitation as usual. You are the expert. Yeah, thank you, everyone. So again, we invite you to join. If you want to get started actually and take a look around the space, we have a delegate protocol where we can give you a small space, right, and then explore for yourself what these services look like and how they work, and then expand from there, right, and then decide if you're comfortable with the technology, if you're comfortable with the environment, feel free to expand that and then get into a more longer term thing to bring other members of your organization on board. So thank you again for joining today. Hopefully you got something out of this.
Cheers. Thank you, Joachim. Thank you, everybody. See you again. Bye for now.
Bye.